All right, let's dive in. Today, we're going on a bit of a safari, but not through a jungle. Nope, we're taking a deep dive into the ecosystem of the Indian financial system. It's a really complex, dynamic world, and we're going to map it all out together. But first, let me ask you something. When you put your money into a savings account or maybe invest in a mutual fund, do you ever stop and think, where does it actually go? What kind of journey does it take? Well, that's exactly what we're about to find out. So, here's our game plan. We're going to start with the basic blueprint of the system. Then, we'll meet the key players, the inhabitants. After that, we'll explore their habitats, check out the resources they use, and finally, get to know the laws of nature that keep everything in balance. Okay, let's start with the absolute basics, the blueprint. What even is a financial system when you get right down to it? You know, the best way to think about it is like the circulatory system for the entire economy. Its whole purpose is to take money from people who have extra, that's the savers, and channel it to those who need it to build or create something new, the investors and borrowers. This flow is literally the fuel for business, for innovation, and for the country's economic growth. So now that we've got the blueprint down, let's meet the inhabitants of this ecosystem. These are the key players, the institutions that really make everything tick. Well, right at the center of this whole thing, you've basically got two main groups. Financial institutions, those are the big, established players, and then you have financial intermediaries, who are kind of like the connectors. Let's look at those big institutions first. So on one side, you have your classic banks, like SBI, and on the other, you've got these non-banking financial companies, or NBFCs. Think Bajaj Finance. So what's the real difference? It all comes down to one simple thing, a banking license. Banks have one, and that lets them accept our deposits. NBFCs don't, but they've become massive players in lending and investing, and they're a huge reason for the growth in consumer credit in India. And, even that word banks is a huge umbrella. You've got the giant commercial banks, both public and private. Then there are cooperative banks, which are really focused on small businesses in rural areas. And you even have super specialized players, like payments banks, designed just for, well, payments and basic deposits. Every single one has its own special role in the ecosystem. And of course, we've got to talk about those connectors we mentioned, the intermediaries. The perfect example is a mutual fund. What it does is it takes small amounts of money from thousands of different people, people like you and me, and invests it all as one big, powerful collective force. They're what make it possible for pretty much anyone to get in on the action in the market. Okay, so we've met the inhabitants, but where do they all hang out? Where do they interact? For that, we need to step into their natural habitats, the financial markets. This is where all the action happens. Now, there are two main habitats you need to know about. First is the primary market. Think of this like a brand new car dealership. It's where a company issues brand new shares for the very first time in an IPO to raise fresh money. And the secondary market? Well, that's the huge, bustling used car lot. It's where all those already existing shares get bought and sold between investors on exchanges like the BSE and NSE. And it's not just about stocks, of course. There are other vital habitats. You've got the money market, which is all about super short-term lending between big institutions. The forex market is this giant global stage where currencies are traded 24/7. And then there's the derivatives market, where the big players use really complex tools to manage their risks. Okay, players? Check. Habitats? Check. But what are they actually trading back and forth? What are they using to build wealth and manage risk? Let's take a look at the resources of this ecosystem, the actual tools of finance. On the most basic level, it really boils down to two kinds of tools. There's equity, which just means buying shares and owning a tiny piece of a company. And then there's debt, which is where you're basically loaning your money to a company or the government through something like a bond, and they promise to pay you back with interest. It's the classic difference. Are you an owner or are you a lender? And from there, the toolkit gets way more complex. You have hybrid instruments that kind of mix the features of ownership and loans, and then those short-term tools like treasury bills that are used for really quick, safe funding between institutions. Look, it's one thing to have a bunch of fancy tools, but you need someone who knows how to use them, right? That's where financial services come in. Think of things like asset management or investment banking as the expert craftspeople who have the skills to actually use these financial tools to build, grow, and protect wealth. So you've got the players, the habitats, the tools, but with all this money and all these people, what stops the whole thing from just descending into chaos? Well, that brings us to the final piece of our puzzle, the laws of nature, enforced by the powerful regulators who make all the rules. So, every part of this ecosystem has its own watchdog. The RBI is kind of like the leader of the pack, overseeing all of banking and setting monetary policy. SEBI polices the stock market, protecting investors. IRDI is in charge of the entire insurance industry, and PFRDA looks after our pensions. Together, these bodies create the rulebook that makes sure things are stable and fair.
So, when you pull it all together, what's the point of this whole thing? Well, this entire complex network, the institutions, the markets, the rules, it's all designed for one big reason: to get money to where it can be used most productively, and in doing so, to fuel the stability and growth of the entire economy.
And this is the main thing I really want you to take away from this. It's all connected. The money in your savings account isn't just sitting there gathering dust. It's the starting point of a journey that ripples through this entire ecosystem, and ultimately, it helps power our national economy. Your finances are a living, breathing part of this massive web. So now that we've had a tour of the whole ecosystem, I'll leave you with a question to think about. When you look at all these different parts, the banks, the markets, the regulators, which one of them do you think has the biggest impact on your personal financial life? It's definitely something we're thinking about. Thanks for diving in with me on this one.